Hey everyone, this is Isaac and welcome to On Point. Today I'd like to talk about legitimacy and how digital media sources, like the one you're watching right now, can either help or hinder a government's ability to rule. Let's start off with a simple definition though first. What is political legitimacy? Simply put, it's the right and acceptance of an authority. A legitimate authority has justification to exercise power, while an illegitimate authority will almost certainly fall. So where does digital media come into this? Where do we, the public, come into this? The answer is that we're new players to a very old game. Now, it wasn't like before the internet. An individual couldn't influence world events. They could, but it was very slow and they had to work within very restrictive means of communication. Television, radio, newspapers, magazines, and books either were easy to access but had a limited range, or difficult to access and could only travel as fast as the interests of elites allowed. Either way, communication was largely in a single direction. Today, any member of the public can talk to, plan with, or convince a citizen of their community, of their nation, or of any other nation to take up a cause or combine resources. A single woman on Facebook can create a women's movement that suddenly becomes the largest protest in U.S. history. And it wasn't just in the United States. It was in Canada, it was in Britain, it was in France, it was in Australia. It's becoming more and more difficult to control and rule over populations. And it's becoming more difficult to hold legitimacy because we, the public, have become stakeholders in public diplomacy. What this means is that the distinction between domestic and foreign is becoming increasingly blurred, because a local event can cause protests around the world in solidarity with the aggrieved party. Do you really think that that doesn't resonate? Do you really think that politicians don't realize that their political capital or their re-election campaigns might be damaged if they don't take the desired stance on, say, America's immigration policy? It should, because how they deal with situations tells us about them. It tells us about their priorities. And these sort of situations are piling up faster and faster for world leaders everywhere. So if the public now has more influence, how do we use it? Well, if there's trust between a government and its public, then any message that either side is wanting to send out suddenly becomes amplified. As an example, let's take Canada and the United States on an issue such as the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. Say, for instance, during the proposed renegotiations that Trump's wanting to enter into, the Canadian government is unable to get a point that it desires. Suddenly, the story gets leaked to the press, and a cross-border dialogue begins between the Canadian public and their American friends, families, and business counterparts, of which there are plenty, about the benefits of intercontinental trade, about the billions of dollars worth of goods that cross the border every day, about the millions of jobs. All of a sudden, the Canadian government has 1 million more diplomats talking into the ear of the American public. I'm not saying that this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm simply saying it's now possible. And that possibility would make the job of the American government much more difficult because they no longer control the storyline. What happens though if that does happen? And suddenly the American public, or the public of any state, become adversarial stakeholders in public diplomacy when they actively begin working against their own government. Take, for instance, the backlash to the election of Donald Trump in America and how that is affecting opinion of the United States in the rest of the world. In Britain, for example, a petition calling for Donald Trump to not be allowed to make an official state visit to save the Queen from the embarrassment of having to meet him, gained such popularity that it forced the British Parliament, one of America's oldest allies, to sit together and have a conversation about the pros and cons of actually inviting the President of the United States to Great Britain to meet its head of state. This is a disaster of public diplomacy on the part of the United States government. But on the part of the protesters, this is a huge success. This is a victory that calls into question the legitimacy of the title Leader of the Free World. I'll have that story for you next time. Stay on point.